Welcome to the Tech-Powered Growth in Professional Services podcast. This podcast explores all the ins and outs of marketing technology maturity in professional services and where firms are using technology to drive their growth. My name is Ben Scott and I'm the Head of Marketing Operations at Thornton, Australia, and my co-host is James Fielding from Ummbrella, the growth agency. Each episode will go deep with a guest into a different area of marketing technology and try to provide some practical tips as to how professional services firms can make the most of that technology. We hope you enjoy the series. Now on to the show. Welcome everyone to the Tech-Powered Growth in Professional Services podcast. This is our very first episode and we're excited to get things underway. As mentioned in the introduction before, my name's Ben Scott. I'm the Head of Marketing Operations at Thornton, and I'm here with my co-host, James Fielding, who is from Ummbrella, the growth agency. Now, James, I guess to give some context to all of this, why are we here today? Why are we chatting? We've obviously worked together on and off over many years on lots of different marketing technology projects, but I guess let's kick things off. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'd say thanks for having me. It's a bit unusual. It's great to finally kick things off. This has been one of those things we've talked about for a while. It's always been a passion of ours, but actually getting here and having a conversation. So looking forward to it. Excited.
Yeah, nice to finally be here after lots of attempts. Okay, so I guess the overview of this podcast series and what the goal of it is that each week we'll be diving in, talking to someone different, a different guest from a different area of marketing technology, and we'll be pulling out different topics. But as an overview starting point, the foundation of the series really is the survey and the report that we did earlier in the year around how firms are using marketing technology in Australia. And I guess to set the context around that as well, we're talking professional services firms here, so law firms, accounting firms, engineering, consulting, etc. And I guess, James, to get started, the findings of the report have been super interesting. And as we talk through them today, we'll pull out some key topics, which will then form our discussion points in future episodes. But do you want to just take us through initially the overview of the report and what we saw?
Yeah, so the report, and this report, the foundation of this report was really that shifting landscape in professional services. So especially coming out of COVID, we had a lot of people investing in technology and professional services, whether that was webinar technology, whether that was a different marketing automation. COVID served as a catalyst for really people investing, and what we saw is the market shifting. So some people are investing heavy, and some people really at that stage looking to change the way they go to market. And what does that look like? So we had this dynamic landscape of things changing, and what we wanted to do was really just get a picture of what does that look like. What technology do firms have at the moment? So what does their tech stack look like? And with that, once they got the technology in, what challenges are they facing? So they may have it in, but what's actually, how's it coming to life? What's getting in the way of them executing? And then really, which is the main crux of this, is what is the impact that is this having on sales and marketing maturity? At the end of the day, what we wanted to see is, have you got what technology is being used, but is that translating into really effective sales and marketing within professional service firms?
Yeah, I think COVID definitely was evolution point for a lot of firms. Like essentially overnight you had to switch from being heavily traditional events focused, things like that, to all of a sudden having to learn how to do things digitally, doing things like teams roundtables, switching events to webinars, all that sort of thing. So I think it was a really steep learning curve for firms in that period. But you could probably argue it has benefited firms a lot as well. Like they needed that burning platform to sort of bring them into the digital age a little bit, because firms were definitely way behind other sort of B2B companies in that regard. Yeah, so I guess the first thing that jumped out when we looked at the aggregated view of firms' tech stacks, there seems to be some gaps still. So did that surprise you?
Yes and no. It wasn't surprising that there was gaps. if you look at any business, no one's going to have full investment across the whole spectrum of different technologies. So having gaps was not a surprise. I guess what the surprise was that where the gaps were. So if you look at it from an individual or a collective basis, you go, oh, there's pretty good coverage across the market. There's lots of people investing in technology. But you look at it from an individual firm perspective, and the gaps are in these core technologies. So you have people who are missing CRM systems. You have people who don't have business intelligence. You have people who don't have email marketing. On an individual by individual basis, you have some firms that have chatbots but don't use LinkedIn, or they may have content management but no marketing automation. That's quite unusual. So it's not the fact that they have gaps. The fact is that they've actually where those gaps exist and how unbalanced those technology stacks are when you look at it. That was a real interesting bit for me, just to guess where the gaps are. And
it's kind of like that robot that's being created in the back shed of just like tinkering things on when you've managed to do it, but maybe not having all the legs in place.
Yeah, and that's a really good analogy, because that's definitely post the survey and the conversations I've been having with people. That's definitely what's come about. Well, that's definitely the theme that's come out. So talking to people, there's a recognition that these haven't been fully designed. They have been reactive, and people have, whether it's COVID or whether it's some other trigger, technology has been put into businesses really on a reactive basis, and that might be as simple as the fact that the budget exists. So if there's a budget, let's take it. And if that budget's $10,000, we'll get technology for $10,000. If that budget's $100,000, we'll take whatever we can get for $100,000. Also feeding into that would be job changes. So you might have people who come with a vision. So you might have a CMO or a senior leader in the business with a strong vision of where they want to take this technology stack. They move on, and people are left to bring up the pieces and don't actually have that overarching vision, and will just take bits and pieces of what's already existing, and they add their own lens to it as well.
And we should say as well, I feel like that's part of the nature of professional services as well, particularly being, what's viewed as support services, where you're just trying to get what you can get. Like, some budget comes up, yeah, we'll take it, we'll use it for this. But because often you don't get that seat at the table for this is the strategic lens on how to build a proper stack.
Yeah, look, I think it's fair to say there wouldn't be many firms sitting out there saying, here's a 3 to 5 year horizon. This is the sales and marketing maturity model we want to reach to, and this is the technology stack that's going to get us there. And we've been sitting with IT, and we know we're going to turn off X at Y point, and we're going to do it. We'd love to see that happening, but I can't imagine there's too many firms that are that sophisticated at the moment.
Yeah. So we'll obviously dive more into this as we go, but I guess at a high level, from what you're saying, there still seems to be plenty of easy wins available.
Yeah, the easy win. So I guess if you look at those firms that don't have the core technology, and that's the win. Get your core stack sorted first. You don't need to have 25 marketing technologies glued together and the most sophisticated end-to-end functionality. The easy win is just concentrating on that core stack. Get your CRM working really well. Don't worry about anything else. Just get one thing working really well. That's one kind of key win. The other is there's just so much low cost, low friction technology out there at the moment now. So with cloud offerings available, you can get plugins, you can get these things. These things are low cost and low friction. You don't need technology teams to be implementing for months. These are pay $30 a month and it comes into your system and it works.
Yeah.
And so things like company data. So you got maybe Lucia. You might have a few LinkedIn Sales Navigator licenses. You can bring these things in with relatively low pain, but very easy gain for the business.
Yeah, and often then it's really just about business rules and process and that type of thing, rather than having to worry too much about integrations or full tech stack design. It's about, okay, let's just get some wins on the board, bring it in, solve some problems for people, and you buy that support as well as you go.
Yeah, 100%, and that's probably a good point as well. Is we talked before about designing a 3 to 5 year window. That's great, but there's also a little bit of let's test and see what works. And the great thing is you do have technology that is low cost. It is on a subscription basis, so you can test these things to see whether they work for your business. I guess the other easy win, and this is if you look at it from a different lens, there's so much technology that's in businesses that isn't being utilized. So I'm not. I don't have this. I forget the stats in front of me, but it might have been around 30 or 40% of people said they had appointment scheduling software or technology to help them with appointment scheduling. You'd imagine that almost every firm has Microsoft bookings.
Yeah.
Here's a technology that exists out of the box that's actually very, very good, but people aren't utilizing it. And I think part of that is things like that aren't a pure sales and marketing technology almost sit within the business and no one takes ownership of it. So does that sit with IT? Does that sit with sales and marketing? Where does that sit? And it kind of floats in no man's land and no one really takes ownership of it. Yeah. So that for me is a very easy win.
Yeah. So essentially we're saying, identify opportunities where you can get those wins, take ownership, grab it by the scruff of the neck and drive it. And then everyone loves a pilot. Professional service firms love a pilot. So if you can pitch it as a pilot, you'll get some budget. And then depending on how it goes, obviously then you can roll it out more widely.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good thing for firms is that, these aren't multi-million-dollar investments that are needed every time. You don't have to do a 3-year business case, and you can actually get easy wins and start making change today.
Yeah. And so I guess building on that, we saw in the data that almost 50% of respondents are dissatisfied with the tech stack. That's not surprising given lack of foundational tech or kind of tech stacks that have been built over time without sort of that long-term strategy. What were your thoughts when you saw that stat?
Yeah, look, I think we can't shy away from the fact that 50% of people being unhappy is pretty grim reading.
Yeah.
It's whether it's much higher than other industries, that would be interesting. But just looking from the core number there, that there's a lot of people who are unhappy. But I think objectively, if you look at the challenges they have every right to be unhappy. We've got technology stacks that are poorly configured. They're not integrated with other systems. A lot of sales and marketing technology sitting within businesses, they're sitting as an island by themselves. They are distant to core finance technology, to how people manage their matters. So, we're in a world where people are getting a feel of what technology is available, and there's lots of good stuff happening. But sales and marketing in a lot of firms is really sitting there as an island by itself. And really, people, you can see that where that frustration will come because people aren't getting the traction that they want. I know personally, so you and I have worked together where we've had some extremely good technology in place. I've also worked in other places where there hasn't been great technology in place, and it's not an overstatement to say you cannot do your job properly if you don't have technology in place. And everything's hard. Everything's hard work. Everything's manual. Everything takes time. So I can see where that level of dissatisfaction comes from. Also, what might be driving this level of dissatisfaction as well is you look at it from a different lens is that people are moving around firms. So if you have like myself, if you have a taste of what good looks like, and then you move to another firm, then you can see where that frustration will come.
Yeah.
And I think especially within those senior leader roles, when you start seeing people move from firm to firm and move around, once they've got a taste of what can be done somewhere else and they don't have it, that will drive a lot of dissatisfaction. But again, if you look at if people aren't satisfied, that's actually a good thing. I'd be worried if you looked at I'd be worried if we looked at these numbers and they said, "Oh, we're all ecstatic." We're all absolutely fine with what we've got. That would be a much bigger worry than people being unsatisfied.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can easily see that if you know what is possible with something, and you know that with this particular piece of software, I can do X, and then you move somewhere and you can't do that anymore, and you're having to manually do workarounds and all that sort of thing. It is incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, I think we'll probably jump into this and probably later, but just not having a sales methodology built within your CRM system. I've been places where also you and I at Grant Thornton, where that foundational having the opportunity pipeline and having the stages, if you move up to somewhere that doesn't have that, your whole architecture of coaching, supporting, enabling disappears and becomes a very different game.
Yeah. I mean, let's hold that thought because we'll come back to that a little bit later. But I guess while we're still talking about foundational technology as well, we saw in the data that CRM was largely dominated by three big players, so Interaction, Dynamics, and Salesforce. But interestingly, there were different levels of maturity reported between these platforms. What do you think's going on there?
Yeah, it was interesting. So, obviously it's no surprise that they are the big three. Obviously, I think that's changing a little bit as well. There's a lot of smaller CRM systems that taking market share as well. But between those three, the difference for me comes because if you dive into the numbers, you can see that CRM within legal has been dominated by Interaction for so long. So for law firms who focus on Interaction, had an unbelievably big market share, where other professional service firms have really moved to Salesforce and Dynamics. So you'd had kind of two camps, and without being too brutal, you have to say that Interaction has been miles behind the market for a long time. I think that's changed now, but in recent years we've seen Interaction that hasn't had the functionality, and certainly not the interface and the user experience that the other functions have had. So that's on the technology side. But I think it's actually more than a technology. So I think if you compare Interaction and legal versus the other systems and outside of that, so accounting, consulting, there's actually a bigger thing at play here. What we're seeing is outside of legal that CRM actually became part of day-to-day operations. So I made that comment before about systems sitting as an island by themselves. Outside of legal, that got solved. People said, we're actually having CRM as our core system. You actually have to take matters into that system. This is going to be part of your day-to-day operations of how you run your business, not a sales and marketing tool that sits on the side. And I think that fundamental change is actually where all the maturity comes from. Because once it's part of your day-to-day, if your client take-on procedures go through there, the way all your contacts go through there, it's automated. It's part of your day-to-day life as a professional. That's very different to a sales and marketing tool that sits on the side.
Yeah, and I know, thinking back to our experience, we did get, we got a lot of things right, we got a lot of things wrong. But one of the things we did get right, I feel, was that you have to open a matter, you have to go through Salesforce to do that. And I do think that in terms of system adoption, that was really key, where your CRM isn't just living as an isolated contact database away from where practitioners are working day in, day out. The fact that you have to go into Salesforce, use that to even create a matter, I think was something we did right.
Oh, unbelievably. I think that's absolutely key. Because you think about what you're saying there, you have to put your matters into the system anyway. So why not put them in early and get all the benefits of having a CRM system? Why don't you get visibility? Why don't you get support? Why don't you get coaching? Why don't you get them subscribe to your content and get your lead nurturing working? It almost, as I said, it becomes second nature as part of operating your business, and also breaks that barrier down to say undertaking sales and marketing, which when we think about it, it's not actually that difficult. It's just part of your day-to-day activity. It's not a weird adjunct to what you do as a professional. And fundamentally that changed and was definitely one of the things we got right.
Yeah. So in future episodes, we can dive a little bit more into, I think, CRMs and differences between law firms and other professional services firms, because I think there's some really interesting insights to pick apart there. And I guess particularly around, it's no surprise maybe to have Salesforce and Microsoft with their level of budgets and the amount of money they can pump into R&D and things like that, to have a slight advantage there over Interaction. But as you said, Interaction definitely has that market share within the legal area. So we can touch on that in future episodes as well. But I guess moving on, just because, we've got a strict timetable today, but firms are, what we saw was that firms are well established in sort of marketing focused operations. So this is kind of moving more to the skill sets now, but they're very good at events. You have dedicated events teams in many firms. It's still a key sort of go-to-market for many firms right across the spectrum of professional services. They're great at content, writing insights, creating articles for the website, all that sort of thing, and traditional BD functions like proposals and pricings. Like everyone has that core foundation that they're still doing and they're doing very well. But what we did see is that maturity in pure sales areas like forecasting, like social selling, like having a pure sales function, and I guess specialist marketing areas like ABM and marketing automation, the level wasn't quite there, like quite drastically dropped off in the data. So I guess based on your chats and what we saw in the report, like what are you thinking is going on there?
Yeah, for me, Ben, this was the most interesting part of the report. So we talked at the start, what was the purpose of the report? It was to see what technologies are people using, what challenges are they facing, but ultimately, what impact is this having on sales and marketing maturity? And this is where the rubber hits the road and saying, and these things are chicken and egg with technology. What I saw, I'll take out the numbers, more so the post conversations I've been having with leaders of sales and marketing within professional services. It's just this change that's happening. So what we're talking about here is actually less about the technology and more about the maturity of roles and what people are doing within businesses. So we talk about sales roles, we talk about specialist marketing roles. If you look at what's happening in the market, everybody is agitating or shifting to this to some degree. It might be a little bit, there might be some roles coming here or there, or it might be full transformation. So there's some firms in the market that are almost, putting a line through the existing structure and moving directly to a different model, where some people are edging to it. But what we're seeing is a couple of things. We've got marketing teams who are traditionally reactive. So we had marketing teams who would update websites, that send out emails, they might make sure the content is written in the right way. Very reactive, very narrow, and very technical. They would do their job, but because they were so narrow, traditionally, traditionally in a sense, they were so narrow and so reactionary, there was a big gap there for the BDMs to fill. So the BDMs had to be the interface to the business. The BDMs had to design the campaigns. BDMs had to design the plans. So BDMs were spread really wide because the marketing teams weren't, being brutal, weren't probably up to scratch. We're now got a situation where there's a lot more demands on those marketing teams. They actually have to do their job. They actually have to own these campaigns. They actually have to interface with the business, and they have to drive that. Essentially, they've got to drive that activity, and they've got to drive it really well. And then what that will do is free up the BDMs to be able to be a lot more focused on that more sales activity. So that's what we're seeing at the moment. So we're seeing the marketing increase their remit or increase their responsibility. And then on the opposite side, BDM's getting much more narrow and focused in terms of that top of funnel marketing, top of funnel sales activity. They're working with partners on opportunities and coaching within an opportunity. They're taking responsibility for managing the pipeline. They're the ones that are taking the numbers and managing the forecast. They're running the sales meetings. They're being much more narrow and focused on sales, and marketing are taking a broader remit and broader responsibility.
I feel like there was a few shots fired there. And as a marketer, I am strictly offended. But no, like I can definitely see what you're saying. Like, I mean, the BDs probably have had the most changing roles in the last 10 years, like in terms of expectations. And definitely, like if I think about when I first started in professional services, marketers were doing a very, very narrow array of work, but I feel like that has changed, largely driven by the technology. And I mean, maybe this is a good time to sort of jump ahead a little bit, where, you know, what is driving the skills and the development of the different roles is largely the technology you have. So kind of linking back to what we're talking about, how it can be really frustrating if you know what's possible, but you don't have the technology to do it. But also you sometimes need the technology, and I'm talking things like marketing automation, in place to really understand the full gamut of what is required from professional marketers these days. And like all of a sudden you're moving from a model of reactive sends of like, okay, the campaign starts and finished when I send this email out to clients, and then no one thinks about it again and hopes someone comes back to us wanting work, to let's look at the full life cycle of your clients. You know, how are we proactively reaching them with communications at the right places in the buying journey? You know, that's chalk and cheese. Like, that's a huge evolution. But to do that, you need the technology in place. So I guess this is the chicken and egg argument. What comes first, the technology or the skills?
Yeah, it's definitely a chicken and egg situation. Look, I think if we reflect on our own situation, you know, we're in a business where, you know, there was definitely capacity to be more mature in terms of sales and marketing on both sides. But once we got that technology in, it did give us the foundation to improve performance on both sides. So not just a marketing thing or a sales side, it actually gave us that fundamental framework that we needed to start improving that. And look at it, and I guess we can be honest to say that didn't happen overnight. That happened in evolutions.
Yeah,
and it will continue to improve in evolutions. But that evolution was, as you rightly say, like that was possible because of the technology.
Yeah, and like particularly if you're not bringing in people from outside, like if you're if you're implementing this technology, you naturally have to bring in people who know how to use it. And then that in turn sort of is the rising tide that lifts all boats, and everyone then starts to understand how to use it. And if you're not bringing external people in, you're probably bringing consultants in to help with that.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit of balance between the generalist versus the specialist. And firms always struggle with this. You know, how specialist do we go in terms of, do all our marketing team, are they able to use marketing automation, or do we bring in a marketing automation specialist and then that uplifts the whole team? And I probably should have mentioned that before when I was talking about the transition of roles within the market. So the marketing team taking more responsibility, sales team pushing up into the sales side. There's also there is those specialist roles coming in. So, as you said, marketing automation specialist. We've got sales enablement specialists. So my role, a few years ago now, where but I think I was one of the first people in sales enablement within the market. There's quite a few people in now. That is a role that's fundamental to bringing these things together, and you're starting to see that shift.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess just keeping us moving as well, because I'm conscious it's all great discussion, and this sets us up really well for the series. I feel like we're going to selfishly meet with some awesome people and have great discussions. But it seems like taking that evolution of the technology as well, obviously having the right technology allows you to talk about it in different ways, and it also then enables you to have stakeholder buy-in. Because traditionally, if you're presenting to partners or an executive team or a board, and you're talking about clicks and likes and, how many people attended your events, it's not quite the same as if you're talking about marketing maturity. You're talking about sales forecasting, like you're talking about attribution in different ways. And so there is very much a a difference in communication with those senior stakeholders. Now, there's a couple of things to that. Stakeholders might not know what you're talking about if they are a partner. So you have to be careful in terms of the speed of that evolution. But if you have non-exec directors on the board, then they're probably going to know what you're talking about because they're coming in from an external lens. So I guess what we saw in the data was that there is still big stakeholder buy-in issues with the technology.
Yeah, that stakeholder buy-in is an interesting one. Again, probably comes to your comment before, like a bit chicken and egg. Yeah, and also things happen in evolution. So for me, we look at the numbers, and buy-in was an issue for 3 and 5 firms. So 60% of firms, buy-in was an issue. And you can look at it from this point of view. I think you're either spiraling up or you're spiraling down. And what I say about what that means is, so let's say you have a system, there's poor configuration, it's not integrated, your sales and marketing maturity is not that high. That's going to deliver poor results. If we're being honest. So, things aren't in place. We're not firing on all cylinders. We're not delivering what the business needs. That then turns into less investment, in terms of training, less investment in terms of integrations, less investment in terms of investing in capability to bring that to life. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Badly designed, badly configured, bad results in less money, less investment doing these things. And progressively it kind of lands at a point where you have a system that's not functioning and there's really low buy-in, or it works the other way. Once you start getting results, people get buy-in, more dollars flow to it, more investment is made to it, and you start seeing those results spiraling up.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it is one of those things, and it leads into culture and development as well. Like if you're not getting results, if you're getting less money, if you don't have the trust of the firm, that just naturally spirals into culture and distrust and all those sorts of things. Where if you're starting to get those wins, you're getting more budget, like people are getting on board, you can feel the tangible change with partners. Everyone wants a piece of that. And so all of a sudden your culture of high performing starts to lift as well.
Yeah, I guess, and that's definitely 100% agree. But at some point, somebody's got to be bold enough. Someone's got to have a leap of faith to say, yes, these results may not happen in Q1 or Q2, but they will happen. And I think, you and I have been fortunate to work in an organisation or with people that have that faith, that know what the results will come. But it's very hard in it's very hard in firms where, decisions are made by business cases and committees.
And by non-marketers or salespeople. So you're ultimately reporting to a partner who might just see it as a cost.
And especially because a lot of those leaders of firms have been within that firm for 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
So you have, what we were talking about before is that, you got these senior marketing and BD people who are moving around, who are seeing what best practice looks like. They're seeing how other people operate, where the people that they want to get buy-in have been within one firm for a long time.
Yeah.
And have traditionally seen growth and these sales and marketing activities from a lens of a professional or a practitioner, as opposed to what can be enabled from a business perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to our last topic here, which is around the golden buzzword of all buzzwords, which is AI. So how many AI buzzwords can AI generate in a generative AI request? But seriously, touching on AI, what are you seeing based on your conversations and the report?
Look, I think this will change week in week. So I think if we look at the numbers that we had within the report, I think if we ran that report again or surveyed people again, those numbers would look very different. I think this is changing at pace. I guess if we just take a moment in time where we did do the report, what we're seeing is people are using out-of-the-box solutions. So, things that are baked into Microsoft, people are utilizing them, or Copilot, and then people are using it for things like low risk in terms of content production or first drafts using ChatGPT for content. they're kind of the big use cases. So just kind of creating content, meetings, automating notes, things like that. So kind of, I would say them kind of low risk. But what I'm from then and what the conversations I'm having in the market, people are, there's a few firms that are diving 2 feet into using AI for proposal development. And not taking an off-the-shelf solution. They're actually training their own versions in terms of looking at their own data within their business and how do they make that operational. So that is moving. And I said, if we have this conversation again, I think there'll be some more use cases where people are really pushing hard in terms of the benefits they get. On a different lens, you think about it, what this is really depends on the culture of the firm and where they're heading more broadly in terms of AI. Is there adoption from the business? I call it the business side, on the practitioner side. If they've got good adoption there and there's good openness there, then it will flow through the sales and marketing team.
Yeah,
there was probably one more interesting thing around that is just where does responsibility sit for AI? Every firm was different, and every firm had variation. So some would be like, for sales and marketing AI, we fully are responsible, or it sits with IT, or it actually sits within an executive, or it sits within a specialist group that's come together. There's all variations of that.
Or like working groups, like multi-service line support function working groups.
Yeah, and I guess, look, if we think about a comment we made at the start of the show about the lack of planning in terms of tech stacks, the risk we'll probably see is in 3 or 4 years' time, we'll have an almost the same kind of robotic build-on-the-fly version of this. It'll be interesting to see what lands. Will businesses have bits and pieces of AI floating around the business from a sales and marketing lens, or will there be a full developed plan of where the best use of AI aligned to strategy and aligned to a technology plan?
And I think it will also be interesting to see where regulation takes us around that as well, because I feel like the last 2 years have just been huge hype around AI, and there's definitely practical considerations and practical applications of it, but there's also now starting to be a little bit of caution in the market in terms of, can we use this? What does this mean for client information? But also some of the ethical considerations around AI. Where are they training these models? What information are they using on that? I do know of some firms not indexing, like deliberately blocking ChatGPT and crawlers to stop them using their own content for training these models. So I think there's also a flip side to that where there's a lot of hype, but it's also going to see, I think, regulation, particularly in the US as well, is starting to look at how do these things interact with our daily lives, and do we want that? But obviously, when we start chatting about AI with our guests later on, I think there's some really interesting things we can uncover there. So I guess, conscious of time, we talked about a whole range of things in this episode, touching from skills, planning, strategy, all the way through to AI. Good news is it does mean that we have a huge amount of topics to talk about on these series, and we've also got some great guests lined up, which we'll release soon. But I guess, James, firstly, thanks, mate. Great chat. Looking forward to getting started for the rest of the series. But yeah, any final comments for the guests?
No, just obviously tune in, listen, and obviously, if you have questions, we'll send around the details of, we'd love this to be a situation where, your questions, your concerns, we can address in future episodes. So we'll create an environment where we're getting feedback and we're getting buy-in to topics. As Ben said, we're fortunate that we have this report that gives us a lot of different angles to take, and we do have some people lined up, but we will be guided by people in terms of what's of interest and is there any specific areas we want to cover. So we'll send around details.
and keeping it practical too, because there's a lot of fluff involved and a lot of buzzwords around technology. So there is definitely an intent from us to try and make this as practical as possible so firms can use anything that they're learning from this in a way that they can go away and implement. So brilliant. All right. Well, thanks, James. And we will release our next episode shortly.
Speak soon. Cheers.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Tech Powered Growth and Professional Services podcast. Please make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast, and don't forget to follow our Tech Powered Growth and Professional Services page on LinkedIn. Thank you.